This heart-wrenching story follows Penelope, a 72-year-old grandmother from Portland who faces the unimaginable loss of her son, Malcolm. As if her grief wasn't overwhelming enough, her beloved grandchildren suddenly cut all contact with her. Desperate and heartbroken, Penelope receives an unexpected call from a private detective her son had hired before his death. What she discovers changes everything. Her daughter-in-law, Victoria, has been weaving a web of lies that tore the family apart. Through this emotional journey of betrayal, loss, and determination, we follow Penelope's struggle to uncover the truth and reclaim her relationship with her grandchildren. A story that reminds us that even in our darkest moments, there is hope for justice and reconciliation. Before we begin this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from. My name is Penelope Harrington, and I'm 72 years old. My life was filled with joy until I lost my only son, Malcolm. That fateful morning last November, the phone rang. It was the hospital. Malcolm had suffered a heart attack at work, they said. By the time I arrived, it was too late. My son, my only child, was gone forever. In the days that followed, I felt like I was walking through a dense fog. Nothing made sense. How could someone who had just turned 45 simply die? He was healthy, took care of himself. His wife Victoria looked devastated, and my grandchildren, Oliver, 16, and Abigail, 14, were completely lost. I live alone in a small house on the outskirts of Portland. After my husband Theodore passed away 10 years ago, I learned to cope with solitude, but this was different. My son was my connection to the world, my comfort, my future. Every Thursday, he would come with the children for dinner. We celebrated all holidays together. Malcolm called me every day, even if just to ask how I was doing. After the funeral, everyone returned to their lives. Victoria inherited Malcolm's share of the construction company he ran with his partner. The grandchildren went back to school, and me, I was left alone with my grief. At first, Victoria called me every day. She talked about the kids, about how they were handling their father's death. She would say things like, "The children are still so fragile, Penelope. Oliver barely speaks, and Abigail cries herself to sleep." I understood. Grief takes time. I offered to help with the children. Maybe I could pick them up from school or have them over for dinner, I suggested. "Not yet," Victoria would say. "They need stability right now. Any change in routine could set them back." I respected her decision, though it pained me not to see my grandchildren. They were all I had left of Malcolm. In their faces, especially Oliver's, I could see my son. The same hazel eyes, the same half smile. Weeks passed, and something began to change. Victoria's calls became less frequent, shorter. When I called her, she always seemed to be in a rush. "Sorry, Penelope, I'm taking the kids to therapy." Or, "We're just heading out to meet with the lawyer about Malcolm's estate." Christmas came, our first without Malcolm. I had always hosted Christmas dinner. For 30 years, my dining room had been filled with laughter, with family. But that year, Victoria called the day before. "We've decided to spend Christmas with my parents in Seattle," she said. "The kids need a change of scenery." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. "Of course," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I understand. I'll have them call you tomorrow," she promised. They never called. By February, I was lucky if I spoke to Victoria once a week. I hadn't seen Oliver or Abigail since the funeral. When I asked to visit, there was always an excuse. The kids had exams, or they were at extracurricular activities, or they were spending the weekend with Victoria's family. "They're having a hard time, Penelope," Victoria would say. "Seeing you, it just reminds them of their dad." Those words cut deep, but I tried to understand. Grief manifests in strange ways, especially in children. Still, something didn't feel right. Malcolm and I had been so close. The children had always loved coming to my house. Oliver would help me in the garden, and Abigail would bake cookies with me. How could my presence suddenly be a source of pain for them? One evening in March, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to their house, a beautiful 2-story home in the suburbs that Malcolm had built with his own hands. I brought cookies, Abigail's favorite, and a new video game for Oliver. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding. Victoria opened the door. her expression shifting from surprise to something else, something that looked almost like anger. "Penelope," she said, not opening the door fully. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see the children," I said, holding up the gifts. "I miss them." Victoria stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "I told you, they're not ready. It's been 4 months, Victoria. I just want to see them, just for a few minutes." She sighed, looking annoyed. "They're not home. They're at a friend's house." But as she spoke, I heard Abigail's laugh from inside. It was unmistakable, the same musical laugh she'd had since she was a toddler. Victoria saw the recognition in my eyes. "They don't want to see you, Penelope," she said coldly. "You need to respect that." I stood there, stunned, as she went back inside and closed the door, the cookies and games still in my hands. I walked back to my car, tears streaming down my face. What had happened? Why were my grandchildren being kept from me? And why would Victoria lie about them not being home? That night, I barely slept. Something was very wrong, and I needed to find out what it was. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my untouched cup of tea. The clock ticked loudly in the silence of my house. 10 months ago, this kitchen had been filled with Malcolm's booming voice and the children's laughter. Now, it felt like a museum of memories. I picked up my phone and called Oliver directly. I had always respected the boundaries Victoria set, calling her first, but this was different. I needed to hear from my grandson himself. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I tried again. This time, he picked up. "Grandma." His voice sounded guarded, uncertain. "Oliver," I said, relief washing over me. "It's so good to hear your voice." There was a pause. "Mom said you called. I wanted to talk to you. I miss you and Abigail so much." Another pause. "Yeah. We've been really busy with school and stuff." His voice was different. The warmth that had always been there when he spoke to me was gone. "Oliver, is everything okay? Did I do something wrong?" "No, it's just..." He lowered his voice. "Mom said it's better if we don't see you for a while." "Why would she say that?" "She said you blame us for Dad's death. That you think if we hadn't stressed him out so much with our problems, he would still be alive." I felt like I'd been slapped. "Oliver, that's not true. I would never think that. Your father's heart attack had nothing to do with you or Abigail. She showed us the texts," he said, his voice hardening, "and the emails. We saw what you wrote. What texts, what emails." "Oliver, I never sent any such messages. I have to go," he said abruptly. "Oliver, please." But he had already hung up. I sat there, stunned. Texts, emails. I had never blamed the children for Malcolm's death. How could I? It was a medical tragedy, not anyone's fault, and I certainly hadn't sent any messages saying otherwise. I tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. I then tried Abigail's number with the same result. Finally, I called Victoria. No answer. Something was very wrong. Victoria was telling my grandchildren lies about me, turning them against me. But why? What could she possibly gain from cutting me out of their lives? I spent the day in a daze, trying to make sense of it all. By evening, I had decided I needed to see the supposed texts and emails for myself. I would go to their house again tomorrow and demand to see this evidence. But that night, my doorbell rang. It was nearly 9 p.m., an unusual time for visitors. When I opened the door, I found a man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes. "Mrs. Harrington?" he asked. "Yes. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm a private investigator. May I come in? It's about your son, Malcolm." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What about my son? He hired me 2 weeks before he died. I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." I led him to my living room, my hands shaking as I offered him tea, which he politely declined. "Mrs. Harrington, your son came to me because he was concerned about his wife's behavior. He believed she was having an affair and possibly embezzling money from their joint accounts." I sank into my chair. "An affair? That doesn't sound like Victoria." "He had evidence," Daniel said, opening his briefcase. "Photos, bank statements, hotel receipts." He asked me to investigate further. He handed me several photographs. They showed Victoria with a man I didn't recognize, entering a hotel, holding hands, kissing in a car. "Who is he?" I asked. "His name is James Lockwood. He's a lawyer who specializes in estate planning and corporate law. He was also handling some of your son's business affairs. I felt sick. Victoria had been cheating on my son with his own lawyer. There's more, Daniel continued. After your son died, I continued the investigation on my own. I felt I owed it to Malcolm. What I found was concerning. He pulled out more documents, bank statements, emails, legal papers. Victoria had been planning to leave Malcolm. She and Lockwood had been transferring funds from the construction company to offshore accounts for months. But then Malcolm had his heart attack, and everything changed. Instead of divorcing him, she inherited everything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Are you saying Victoria was stealing from my son? Yes. And there's something else. Daniel hesitated. The medical examiner found unusual levels of a particular medication in Malcolm's system. It's commonly prescribed for high blood pressure, but Malcolm didn't have high blood pressure. The room seemed to spin around me. What are you saying? I'm saying that Victoria had means, motive, and opportunity. I can't prove anything definitive yet, but I believe there's enough here to warrant a police investigation. I stared at the documents spread across my coffee table, pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. And the children? Why keep them from me? Control, Daniel said simply. As long as she controls the children, she controls Malcolm's estate. Plus, she knows you were close to Malcolm. She probably fears you might notice something's off. She's been telling them I blame them for their father's death, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Daniel nodded grimly. Classic manipulation. Turn them against you before you can turn them against her. I looked up at him, newfound determination rising within me. What do we do now? We gather more evidence, he said, and then we go to the police. But Mrs. Harrington, this won't be easy. Victoria is clever, and she has resources. I don't care, I said firmly. Those children are all I have left of my son, and if there's even a chance that Victoria had something to do with Malcolm's death, I need to know the truth. As Daniel left that night, I stood in my doorway, watching him drive away. The world as I knew it had shattered once again. But this time, instead of grief, I felt something different. Resolve. Victoria had taken my son from me, and now she was trying to take my grandchildren too. I wouldn't let her get away with it. Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, Daniel's revelations playing on an endless loop in my mind. Victoria, having an affair. Victoria, stealing from Malcolm. Victoria, possibly involved in my son's death. It seemed unbelievable, yet the evidence was compelling. By morning, I had made a decision. I wouldn't confront Victoria directly. Not yet. First, I needed to gather my own evidence, and, most importantly, try to reconnect with my grandchildren. If what Daniel said was true, they were living with a woman who might have harmed their father. The thought made me sick with worry. I called Daniel early, surprising him with my determination. I want to see everything you have, I told him. Every photo, every document, and I want to know what our next steps are. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown, away from any prying eyes. I arrived early, nursing a cup of tea as I waited. The cafe was quiet, just a few students with laptops and an elderly couple reading newspapers. Daniel arrived with a thick folder. Everything I have so far, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. I spent the next hour examining bank statements, photographs, and email printouts. The evidence was damning. Victoria had been withdrawing large sums from joint accounts for months before Malcolm's death. The photos showed her and James Lockwood in various locations around Portland, and even on a weekend trip to Seattle, all during times when she had told Malcolm she was visiting her sister. What about the medication? I asked. The one found in Malcolm's system. Daniel's expression grew serious. Propranolol. It's a beta blocker, typically used for high blood pressure, anxiety, migraines. In high doses, it can cause heart rhythm problems. And Malcolm was taking this. According to the toxicology report, yes, but his medical records show no prescription for it. I felt cold. Could it have caused his heart attack? In a healthy person with no history of heart issues, if the dose was high enough, it's possible, but proving it would be difficult. Heart attacks happen, even to healthy people. Victoria is a pharmaceutical sales rep, I said quietly. She would know about medications. Daniel nodded grimly. That's part of what concerns me. As we talked, a plan began to form. Daniel would continue gathering evidence about the financial irregularities and possible medication tampering. Meanwhile, I would focus on reconnecting with Oliver and Abigail. Be careful, Daniel warned. Victoria is clearly manipulating them. If you push too hard, it might backfire. I nodded, understanding the delicate balance I needed to strike. I'll start with their school. That afternoon, I drove to Portland Central High School. I had picked up Oliver and Abigail from school countless times before Malcolm's death. The security guard at the entrance, Mr. Reynolds, knew me well. Mrs. Harrington, he greeted me warmly. Haven't seen you in a while. I've been dealing with some things, I said vaguely. I was so sorry to hear about Malcolm. He was a good man. I thanked him and explained that I was hoping to surprise my grandchildren. Oliver should be finishing basketball practice about now, Mr. Reynolds said, checking his watch. Jim's that way. I thanked him and made my way to the gymnasium. Through the doors, I could see a group of boys playing basketball. Oliver was among them, tall like his father, his movements on the court graceful and precise. I waited until practice ended and the boys started filing out. Oliver spotted me immediately, his expression changing from surprise to something like wariness. He approached slowly, his gym bag slung over his shoulder. Grandma, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you, I said simply. I miss you, Oliver. He glanced around nervously, as if afraid someone might see us talking. Mom said you didn't want to see us anymore. That's not true, I said firmly. I've been trying to see you and Abigail for months, but the texts, I never sent any texts saying I blamed you for your father's death. Oliver, I would never think that. Your father had a heart attack. It was no one's fault. He looked confused. But Mom showed us. Whatever she showed you wasn't from me. Oliver, I love you and Abigail more than anything in this world. You're all I have left of your father. I could see doubt in his eyes, the first crack in the wall Victoria had built between us. Look, I continued. I know this is confusing, but can we just talk? Maybe get some ice cream like we used to. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. I have to be home by 6. That gives us almost 2 hours. We walked to a nearby ice cream parlor, one that Malcolm had taken the children to since they were little. As we sat with our cones, chocolate chip for him, butter pecan for me, I could see Oliver gradually relaxing. How have you been? I asked gently. Okay, I guess. He shrugged. School's fine. Basketball's good. And at home? How are things with your mom? His expression clouded slightly. Fine. And Abigail? She's okay. She's in the school play, Romeo and Juliet. She always loved drama. I smiled. I'd love to see it. Oliver was quiet for a moment, then said, Mom's been different since Dad died. She goes out a lot, says it's work. But, he trailed off. But what, Oliver? He shook his head. Nothing. I decided not to push. Oliver, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm here for you and Abigail. Always. No matter what your mother might have told you. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since we'd sat down. I miss Dad, he said, his voice cracking slightly. I miss him too, I said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. Every day. As our time together drew to a close, I felt a small victory. The wall hadn't come down completely, but there was a doorway now, a possibility of reconnection. Can I see you again? I asked as we stood outside the ice cream parlor. Oliver nodded. Maybe. I'll try to talk to Abigail too. I'd like that, I said. And Oliver, please don't tell your mother about today. Not yet. I think she might misunderstand. He gave me a long look, then nodded again. Okay. As I watched him walk away, I felt a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that I could rebuild my relationship with my grandchildren. Dread at what might happen when Victoria discovered my efforts. But I couldn't stop now. Not when there was so much at stake. The next day, I met with Daniel again. We had agreed to check in regularly, sharing any new information we discovered. He had been busy. I've been looking into Victoria's relationship with Lockwood, he said, spreading photographs across my kitchen table. It goes back further than Malcolm thought. The photos showed Victoria and James Lockwood together at various events dating back nearly 2 years. In one, they were at a charity gala, standing close, his hand on the small of her back. In another, they were leaving a restaurant, fingers intertwined. Malcolm only suspected for the last few months of his life, Daniel continued, but they've been involved for much longer. Did Malcolm know about any of this? I asked, feeling a renewed sense of betrayal on my son's behalf. I don't think so. Not until near the end. Daniel pulled out a printout of an email. This was sent from Malcolm to Lockwood 3 weeks before his death. It suggests Malcolm had just discovered something suspicious in the company accounts. I read the email. Malcolm was questioning several large transfers to an account he didn't recognize. The tone was professional, but firm. A week after this, Malcolm hired me, Daniel said. He was suspicious, but he didn't yet know the full extent of what was happening. And then he died, I said quietly. Daniel nodded grimly. Convenient timing. We spent the next hour going through bank records, emails, and other documents. The picture they painted was disturbing. Victoria and Lockwood had been systematically diverting funds from Malcolm's construction company for over a year. The amount started small but grew larger as time went on. Where was this money going? I asked. Offshore accounts, primarily, Daniel replied. Some of it came back as investments, owned in the company through shell corporations owned by Lockwood. Classic money laundering technique. I shook my head in disbelief. And now Victoria controls everything. Not quite everything, Daniel corrected. Malcolm's business partner, Elliot, still owns half the company. Has Victoria been in contact with him? I tried to recall. I'm not sure. I've been so cut off from everything. I'll look into it, Daniel said, making a note. Elliot might be an ally, especially if Victoria is trying to control the entire company. As Daniel was preparing to leave, I remembered my meeting with Oliver. I saw my grandson yesterday, I told him. I went to his school after basketball practice. Daniel looked concerned. Was that wise? If Victoria finds out? She won't. Oliver promised not to tell her. And I needed to see him, to start breaking through whatever lies she's been telling them. How did it go? Better than I expected. He's confused, but I think he's starting to question what Victoria has told him. He mentioned that she goes out a lot, supposedly for work. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. That's good. The children could be valuable witnesses if they've noticed anything unusual. But be careful, Penelope. Victoria won't take kindly to you interfering with her narrative. After Daniel left, I sat alone, contemplating our next steps. The evidence against Victoria was mounting, but it was still largely circumstantial. We needed something more concrete before going to the police. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. Grandma, it's Abigail. Oliver told me you saw him today. Can we talk? My heart leaped. I quickly replied, yes, of course. When and where? Tomorrow, after drama rehearsal. 5 p.m. The park near school. I slept better that night than I had in months. The prospect of seeing Abigail, of potentially reconnecting with both my grandchildren, filled me with hope. The next day, I arrived at the park early, finding a bench with a good view of the path from the school. The afternoon was mild, with a gentle breeze rustling the newly budding trees. Spring was coming, bringing with it a sense of renewal that matched my cautious optimism. At precisely 5 p.m., I saw Abigail walking toward me. She was alone, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her red hair, so like her father's, catching the sunlight. She looked older somehow, the past few months having added a maturity to her young face that hadn't been there before. She sat beside me on the bench, setting her backpack between us like a barrier. Hi, Grandma, she said, her voice soft. Abigail, I replied, resisting the urge to pull her into a hug. So good to see you. She looked at me, her green eyes, Malcolm's eyes, studying my face. Oliver said you told him you never sent those texts, about blaming us for Dad's death. That's right, I said firmly. I would never think that, let alone say it. Your father's heart attack was a medical event, not anyone's fault. But Mom showed us the messages, Abigail insisted. They came from your number. Abigail, I don't know how that happened, but I never sent those messages. I've been trying to see you both for months, but your mother always had reasons why I couldn't. She was quiet for a moment, processing this. Mom said you were too depressed to see us, that you needed time alone. Another lie. I've been grieving, yes, but being with you and Oliver would have helped, not hurt. You two are my world. Why would Mom lie about that? It was a direct question, and I had to be careful with my answer. I couldn't tell her everything, not yet, but I also couldn't continue the cycle of lies. I don't know for sure. I said carefully. But sometimes, when people are grieving, they don't think clearly. They make decisions that might not make sense to others. Abigail seemed to accept this, at least for now. I've missed you, she admitted. The house feels different without Dad, and Mom's been different too. Different how? She shrugged. She's gone a lot. She says it's work, but sometimes she comes home smelling like cologne, and she's on her phone all the time. But she gets weird if Oliver or I come near her when she's texting. My heart ached at the thought of my grandchildren navigating these suspicious circumstances alone. Have you met any of your mom's work friends? Just Mr. Lockwood. He comes over sometimes for dinner. Mom says he's helping with Dad's estate stuff. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I was seething. Victoria was bringing her lover into Malcolm's home, around his children. How do you feel about Mr. Lockwood? I asked carefully. Abigail wrinkled her nose. He's okay, I guess. Kind of fake nice, you know? Like he's trying too hard. Oliver can't stand him. We talked for nearly an hour. About school. About the play she was in. About memories of Malcolm. It felt good. Normal. Like bridging a gap that should never have existed. As our time together drew to a close, Abigail asked, "Can I see you again?" "I'd like that very much," I said. "Maybe next time, you and Oliver could both come." She nodded. "I'll try, but we have to be careful. Mom would be really mad if she knew we were seeing you." "I understand," I said, though it broke my heart that my grandchildren had to sneak around to see their own grandmother. "Abigail, no matter what happens, I want you to know that I love you and Oliver more than anything. Nothing will ever change that." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I love you too, Grandma." As I watched her walk away, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Victoria had taken my son from me. I wouldn't let her take my grandchildren too. That night, I called Daniel and updated him on my conversation with Abigail. "This is good," he said. "The children are starting to question Victoria's narrative. But Penelope, we need to move carefully. If Victoria suspects what we're doing, she might take drastic measures." "Like what?" "Like moving away with the children, or accelerating whatever financial scheme she's running with Lockwood." "What do we do next?" I asked. "I think it's time to talk to Elliot, Malcolm's business partner. If Victoria and Lockwood have been embezzling from the company, he's a victim too, and he might have information we need." I agreed. The next day, we would approach Elliot, one more potential ally in our quest for the truth. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at a photograph of Malcolm on my nightstand. It was taken at his 40th birthday, his arm around me, his smile wide and genuine. "I'll make this right," I whispered to his image. "I promise." The next morning, Daniel and I met at a coffee shop near the headquarters of Harrington and Brooks Construction, the company Malcolm had built with his college roommate, Elliot Brooks. I was nervous. I hadn't seen Elliot since Malcolm's funeral, where he had been visibly devastated by the loss of his friend and business partner. "Let me do most of the talking at first," Daniel suggested as we waited. "Well, Elliot might be wary if we come at him with accusations about Victoria right away." I nodded, understanding the need for caution. Elliot had always been fond of Victoria, or at least he had seemed to be. Malcolm and Elliot had been like brothers, their families often spending holidays and vacations together. I couldn't be sure where Elliot's loyalties would lie now. At precisely 10 a.m., Elliot walked in. He spotted me immediately, surprise registering on his face before he made his way to our table. "Penelope," he said warmly, embracing me. "It's been too long. Too long indeed," I agreed. "Elliot, this is Daniel Mercer. He's a private investigator." Elliot's expression shifted from warm to guarded as he shook Daniel's hand. "A private investigator. What's this about?" "Please, sit down," I said. "We have something important to discuss with you." As Elliot settled into his chair, Daniel began explaining. He started with Malcolm hiring him before his death, suspecting Victoria of infidelity. He moved on to the financial irregularities discovered in the company accounts, the relationship with James Lockwood, and finally, the suspicious circumstances surrounding Malcolm's death. Throughout Daniel's explanation, Elliot's expression darkened. By the time Daniel finished, Elliot looked both shocked and angry. "I knew something was off," he said, his voice low. "The accounts haven't been adding up for months. Victoria's been pushing to take a more active role in the financial side of the business, claiming it's what Malcolm would have wanted, and Lockwood, he shook his head in disgust. And that snake has been circling the company since before Malcolm died. I never trusted him. Have you noticed any specific irregularities? Daniel asked. Elliot nodded grimly. Several projects have come in way over budget in the past 6 months. When I questioned it, Victoria produced documentation showing Malcolm had approved the additional expenses, but some of the signatures looked off, forged, Daniel suggested. I couldn't prove it, but yes, that was my suspicion. Elliot ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen Malcolm make countless times. And there's more. Last month, Victoria proposed selling a piece of property the company owns, prime real estate that Malcolm and I bought as an investment years ago. She claimed we needed the capital for a new project, but when I looked into it, the buyer was a shell company. I did some digging and found connections to Lockwood. Daniel leaned forward. Interest peaked. Did the sale go through? No. As equal partner, I blocked it. Victoria was furious, threatened to sue me for obstructing the company's growth. Elliot's expression hardened. That's when I started quietly investigating on my own. What have you found? I asked. Enough to be concerned. Missing funds, questionable transactions, contracts with suppliers that don't make sense financially. He looked at Daniel. I've been gathering evidence, but I wasn't sure what to do with it. I didn't want to believe Victoria could be behind this. We need to combine our evidence, Daniel said. Together, we might have enough to take to the authorities. Elliot nodded slowly. I'm in. For Malcolm. For Malcolm, I echoed. We spent the next hour going through the evidence Elliot had gathered. Combined with what Daniel had already uncovered, the case against Victoria and Lockwood was growing stronger. But we still lacked a smoking gun, something that would definitively prove Victoria's involvement in Malcolm's death. What about the medication? I asked. The one found in Malcolm's system. Propranolol, Daniel confirmed. I've been looking into that. Victoria, as a pharmaceutical sales rep, would have knowledge of and potentially access to various medications, but proving she administered it to Malcolm without his knowledge would be difficult. Unless, Elliot interjected, we could find evidence that she purchased or obtained it. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. That's one angle we're pursuing. We're also looking into Malcolm's movements on the day he died, who he saw, what he ate and drank. As our meeting drew to a close, we agreed on next steps. Elliot would continue monitoring the company's finances and gathering evidence of embezzlement. Daniel would focus on the circumstances surrounding Malcolm's death, and I would continue building bridges with my grandchildren, hoping they might provide insights into Victoria's behavior at home. Just as we were about to leave, Elliot placed a hand on my arm. Penelope, there's something else you should know. Malcolm changed his will about a month before he died. I froze. Changed it how? I don't know the details. He mentioned it to me in passing. Said he wanted to ensure everyone was protected. I assumed he meant Victoria and the kids. Or maybe he was already suspicious of Victoria, Daniel suggested. Maybe he made changes to protect the children's inheritance from her. If that's the case, I said slowly, Victoria would have every reason to want that will to disappear. Daniel made a note. I'll look into it. If Malcolm made a new will, there should be records with his attorney. Not Lockwood, Elliot clarified. Malcolm used Patricia Winters for his personal legal matters. Lockwood only handled business affairs. Armed with this new information, we parted ways, each with our own tasks to complete. As I drove home, my mind was racing. If Malcolm had changed his will, what did it contain? And did Victoria know about it? That afternoon, I received a text from Oliver. Can we meet tomorrow? Abigail too. After school. Same park. My heart leaped with joy and anticipation. Yes, of course. 4 p.m.? Perfect. That night, I called Daniel to update him on the meeting with my grandchildren. This is good, he said, but be careful what you share with them. They're still young and vulnerable. And they're living with Victoria. I know, I assured him. I won't burden them with suspicions about their mother. They've lost enough already. The next day, I arrived at the park early again, my nerves tingling with anticipation. At precisely 4 p.m., I spotted Oliver and Abigail walking toward me. They were talking animatedly, stopping when they saw me. I raised my hand in greeting, trying to appear casual, despite the emotions swirling inside me. Hi, Grandma, they said almost in unison as they approached. Hello, my darlings, I replied, resisting the urge to pull them into a tight embrace. It's wonderful to see you both. We settled on the bench, the children on either side of me. For a moment, we sat in silence, the weight of the past months hanging between us. Mo, we've been talking, Oliver finally said, about everything that's happened, about what Mom told us. And we don't believe it anymore, Abigail added firmly. You would never blame us for Dad's death. Never, I agreed, emotion thick in my voice. Your father was my only child, and losing him broke my heart. But you two are part of him that lives on. You're precious to me. Mom showed us texts, Oliver said, his brow furrowed. Messages she said were from you, but when we asked to see your contact information in her phone yesterday, we noticed something weird. What was that? I asked, my heart racing. The contact wasn't saved under your real name, Abigail explained. It was saved as Penelope Fake. Why would Mom label it that way if they were really messages from you? I felt a chill. That is strange. We think, Oliver hesitated, exchanging a glance with his sister. We think Mom might have set up a fake number to make it look like you were sending those messages. But why would she do that? I asked, wanting to hear their thoughts. And to keep us away from you, Abigail said simply. But we don't know why she'd want that. I took a deep breath. Your mother is grieving, just like we all are. Sometimes grief makes people do things that don't make sense. It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either, and it was all I could safely share for now. There's something else, Oliver said, his voice dropping lower. Mom and Mr. Lockwood, they're together. Together, I repeated, feigning surprise. Like dating, Abigail clarified, wrinkling her nose. We saw them kissing when they thought we were asleep. It was gross. It was disrespectful, Oliver corrected, anger flashing in his eyes. Dad's only been gone a few months, and she's already with someone else. Someone Dad worked with. I chose my words carefully, and that must be difficult for you both to see. It's not just that, Oliver continued. They're always whispering about money, about the company. I overheard them talking about selling some property that belongs to the business. But Uncle Elliot was getting in the way. I felt a surge of validation. Elliot's account was being corroborated by my grandson. And there's something else, Abigail added, her voice barely above a whisper. The night before Dad died, I heard them fighting. My breath caught. Your parents, she nodded. Dad was really upset. He said something about money missing and trust being broken. Mom said he was being paranoid. It was scary. They never fought like that before. I reached out, taking each of their hands in mine. I'm so sorry you've been dealing with all of this alone. We're not alone anymore, Oliver said, squeezing my hand. We have you. Yes, you do, I assured them. Always. We spent the next hour talking. About school, about their friends, about memories of Malcolm. It felt almost normal, this time with my grandchildren. But beneath the surface, I was processing the new information they had shared. Malcolm and Victoria had fought the night before his death. About missing money, about broken trust. Had Malcolm confronted her about the affair? About the embezzlement? And what had Victoria done in response? As our time together drew to a close, Oliver asked, "Can we come see you at your house, like we used to?" My heart swelled. I would love that, but we need to be careful. Your mother would be really mad, Abigail finished. We know. But maybe this weekend, we could say we're going to friends' houses. I hesitated, torn between my desire to have them in my home again and my concern about deceiving Victoria. Let's see. We'll figure something out. For now, let's keep meeting like this. It's safer. They nodded, understanding the complexity of our situation. As they prepared to leave, Abigail suddenly threw her arms around me. I love you, Grandma. I'm sorry I believed those texts were real. I love you too, sweetheart. And there's nothing to forgive. Oliver joined the embrace, and for a moment, we stood there, 3 generations holding on to each other against the winds of betrayal and loss. After they left, I called Daniel immediately to share what I had learned. This is significant, he said. The argument the night before Malcolm's death, Victoria setting up fake messages to alienate the children from you, her relationship with Lockwood being more open now. It all points to a plan that's accelerating. What do we do? I asked. I think it's time to speak with Patricia Winters, Malcolm's personal attorney. If he changed his will, she would know. And if Victoria is aware of that change, it might give us the motive we've been looking for. The next morning, Daniel and I sat in the waiting room of Patricia Winters' law office in downtown Portland. The space was elegant, but understated, with leather chairs and tasteful artwork on the walls. Patricia had agreed to see us after I explained that it concerned my late son's estate. At precisely 10 a.m., a door opened, and Patricia emerged. She was in her early 60s, with silver hair cut in a stylish bob and sharp, intelligent eyes behind designer glasses. I had met her a few times over the years when Malcolm was updating his will or handling other legal matters. "Mrs. Harrington," she said warmly, extending her hand. "It's been too long. I was deeply sorry to hear about Malcolm." "Thank you," I replied. "And this is Daniel Mercer, a private investigator who's been helping me with some matters related to Malcolm's estate." Patricia's eyebrow raised slightly at the mention of a private investigator, but she maintained her professional demeanor as she led us into her office. "How can I help you today?" she asked once we were seated. "I understand that Malcolm updated his will shortly before his death," I began. "I'd like to know the details of those changes." Patricia's expression turned guarded. "I'm afraid I can't discuss the contents of Malcolm's will with you unless you're named as an executor or have legal standing to access that information." "Victoria is the executor, I assume?" Daniel asked. "Yes. As his spouse, Victoria was named executor," Patricia confirmed. "Was," I noted. "Past tense. Did that change in the updated will?" Patricia hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Harrington, as I said, I can't discuss." "Patricia," I interrupted gently, "I believe my son's death may not have been from natural causes. We have reason to suspect Victoria might have been involved." The attorney's eyes widened. "That's a serious accusation." "We know," Daniel said, opening his briefcase, "and we have evidence to support our concerns." He laid out the photographs of Victoria and Lockwood, the financial documents showing the embezzlement, and the toxicology report highlighting the presence of propranolol in Malcolm's system. Patricia examined each item carefully, her professional composure slipping as the full picture emerged. When she looked up, her expression had changed from guarded to troubled. "And I can't violate attorney-client privilege," she said slowly, "but I can tell you that Malcolm came to see me 3 weeks before his death. He was concerned about protecting his children's inheritance. He believed Victoria was having an affair and misappropriating company funds." "What did he do about it?" I asked. Patricia chose her words carefully. "He made changes to ensure that, in the event of his death, the children's interests would be protected. He also—" She paused, seemingly weighing her professional obligations against her concerns. "He also left a sealed letter with me, to be opened only in the event of his death under suspicious circumstances." My heart raced. "A letter? Have you opened it?" "No. His death was ruled a heart attack, a natural cause. There was no reason to consider it suspicious at the time. But now," Daniel pressed. Patricia looked at the evidence spread across her desk again. "Now, I'm not so sure." She stood up, walking to a safe built into the wall of her office. After entering a combination, she removed a sealed envelope. "This is Malcolm's letter. Given what you've shown me, I believe there may be grounds to open it." She sat back down, breaking the seal on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in Malcolm's distinctive handwriting. Patricia read it silently first, her expression growing increasingly grave. Then, she began to read aloud. "If you're reading this, it means I'm dead, and something has raised suspicions about how I died. Here's what I know. Victoria has been having an affair with James Lockwood for at least a year. They've been stealing from the company, setting up offshore accounts and shell corporations. I've gathered evidence, which I've stored in a safe deposit box at First National Bank, box number 447. The key is hidden in my workshop at home, taped under the bottom drawer of my tool chest. I've also copied all relevant files onto a flash drive, hidden in the same location. If anything happens to me, please ensure this information reaches the proper authorities. Most importantly, protect my children and my mother. They are innocent in all of this. Victoria is dangerous and calculating. Don't underestimate her. Malcolm Harrington." Silence fell over the room as Patricia finished reading. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and despair. My son had known. He had suspected Victoria, had gathered evidence against her, and then he had died. "We need to get to that safe deposit box," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "And the flash drive," I added. "But they're both in the house. Victoria has control of everything now." "Not quite everything," Patricia said, returning to her desk. She opened another drawer and removed a legal document. "The changes Malcolm made to his will. Victoria is still the primary beneficiary for most assets, but he created trusts for the children that she cannot access. And he named you, Mrs. Harrington, as the trustee." "Me?" I was surprised. "But Victoria is their guardian." "Yes, but you control their inheritance until they turn 25. Malcolm also added a provision that if Victoria were to remarry within 2 years of his death, the majority of his assets would pass directly to the children's trusts, with you as trustee. So if Victoria marries Lockwood," Daniel began. "She loses control of most of Malcolm's estate," Patricia confirmed. "And given what we now know, I suspect she's aware of this provision. Has the will been executed as Malcolm intended?" I asked. Patricia's expression darkened. "That's another concern. Victoria brought in a different will for probate, one that predates the changes Malcolm made with me. When I questioned this, she claimed it was the most recent version, without Malcolm's letter or the evidence he mentioned. I had no grounds to challenge her. She's been lying about everything," I said, anger building within me. "To the courts, to the children, to me, and potentially committing fraud, embezzlement, and possibly murder," Daniel added grimly. "What do we do now?" I asked, looking between Daniel and Patricia. First, we need to secure the evidence Malcolm mentioned," Daniel said. "The safe deposit box and the flash drive. I can help with the bank," Patricia offered. "As Malcolm's attorney, I may be able to gain access to the safe deposit box, especially with this letter as evidence of his intentions." "And the flash drive?" I asked. "That's trickier," Daniel admitted. "It's in the house, where Victoria lives. We'd need a way to get inside without her knowledge. I thought about my grandchildren, about their desire to visit me at my home. I might have a way," I said slowly, "but I'll need a few days to arrange it." We left Patricia's office with a plan in motion. She would attempt to access the safe deposit box legally, using Malcolm's letter and her status as his attorney. Meanwhile, I would work on getting access to the house through my grandchildren, hoping to retrieve the flash drive Malcolm had hidden. As Daniel drove me home, I felt a strange sense of calm washing over me. For months, I had been lost in grief and confusion, cut off from my grandchildren, unsure of what had happened to my son. Now I had answers, painful ones, but answers nonetheless. And I had a purpose: to bring Victoria to justice and protect Oliver and Abigail. "We're getting close," Daniel said, as if reading my thoughts. "But Victoria is in a corner now. That makes her dangerous. You need to be careful, especially around the children." "I will," I promised, "but I won't stop until this is over, until Malcolm has justice." Daniel nodded approvingly. "You're tougher than you look, Penelope." I smiled grimly. "I'm a mother. We fight for our children, no matter what, even when they're gone." The next day, I received a text from Abigail. "Mom's going to Seattle this weekend for a conference. We're supposed to stay with her sister, but we could come see you instead, Friday night to Sunday afternoon." My heart raced with both excitement and anxiety. This was the opportunity we needed to search for the flash drive, but it also meant having my grandchildren lie to their mother, something that didn't sit well with me, regardless of what Victoria had done. I called Daniel immediately to discuss the situation. "It's perfect timing," he said when I explained. "Patricia has made progress with the bank. They've agreed to let her access the safe deposit box on Friday morning. With any luck, we'll have both pieces of evidence by the weekend. But I'm asking the children to lie," I said, my concern evident. "Isn't there another way?" "Penelope," Daniel said gently, "Victoria has been lying to them for months. She's kept them from you, manipulated them, and potentially had a role in their father's death. This isn't about teaching them to lie. It's about protecting them and finding justice for Malcolm." I knew he was right, but it still felt wrong. However, the stakes were too high to let moral quandaries stop us now. I texted Abigail back. "I would love to have you both, but are you sure about not telling your mom?" Her response came quickly. "We're sure. Mom's been lying to us about you, and about other things too. We want to help." I marveled at the maturity and perception of my grandchildren. They had sensed something was wrong and were making their own decisions about whom to trust. I felt proud of them, even as I worried about involving them in our investigation. "Okay," I texted back. "What time will you arrive on Friday?" "Around 6 p.m. Mom leaves at noon for the airport. Friday couldn't come soon enough." I spent the days in between preparing my house for my grandchildren's visit. I cleaned their rooms, kept exactly as they had been before Malcolm's death, and stocked the kitchen with their favorite foods. I also coordinated with Daniel and Patricia, finalizing our plan to retrieve the evidence Malcolm had left behind. On Friday morning, Patricia called with news. "I've accessed the safe deposit box," she said, her voice tense with excitement. "Malcolm wasn't exaggerating. Penelope, there's a wealth of evidence here. Financial records, photographs, even recordings of conversations between Victoria and Lockwood. He was thorough." "Recordings?" I asked, surprised. "Yes, stored on a small digital recorder. I've listened to a few. They're damning. Victoria and Lockwood discussing the embezzlement, their relationship, even their plans for after they get rid of the problem, which I can only assume meant Malcolm. I felt sick. So they were planning to kill him. It certainly sounds that way," Patricia confirmed grimly. "I'm making copies of everything and securing the originals. By the time your grandchildren arrive tonight, we should have everything ready to take to the authorities. All we need now is the flash drive." The hours crawled by until finally, at precisely 6 p.m., my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Oliver and Abigail standing there, overnight bags in hand. Without a word, I pulled them both into a tight embrace. "I've missed you so much," I whispered. "Ah, we've missed you too, Grandma," Abigail said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Once inside, we fell into a semblance of our old routine. I had prepared their favorite meal, lasagna with garlic bread and a Caesar salad. As we ate, they told me about school, their friends, their activities. For a while, it felt almost normal, as if the past months of separation had never happened. After dinner, as we sat in the living room with mugs of hot chocolate, I knew I had to broach the real reason for our reunion. "There's something I need to tell you both," I began carefully. "Something about your father." They exchanged glances, suddenly alert. "What about Dad?" Oliver asked. I took a deep breath. "Your father was concerned about some things before he died. He left behind evidence. Important documents that could help us understand what happened to him." "What kind of evidence?" Abigail asked. "Financial records, mostly," I said, not wanting to burden them with the full truth yet. "He hid a flash drive in his workshop at your house, in his tool chest. You want us to find it," Oliver said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "I know it's asking a lot, but it's important, for your father's memory and for your future." "Is this about Mom and Mr. Lockwood?" Abigail asked perceptively. "Partly," I admitted. "Your father discovered some things about them that concerned him. That's why he gathered evidence and hid it." Oliver's expression hardened. "And then he died." The implication hung heavy in the air. I hadn't explicitly said that Victoria might be responsible for Malcolm's death, but Oliver was old enough, smart enough, to connect the dots. "We'll get it," he said firmly. "We're going home Sunday afternoon. We can look in Dad's workshop then." "Be careful," I cautioned. "Don't take any risks. If there's any chance of your mother finding out, don't do it." "We'll be careful," Abigail promised. "Mom never goes in Dad's workshop anyway. She says it makes her too sad." The rest of the evening was spent watching movies and talking, carefully avoiding the heavier topics looming over us. When the children finally went to bed, in their old rooms that I had maintained all these months, I called Daniel to update him. "They've agreed to look for the flash drive on Sunday," I told him. "Before Victoria returns from Seattle." "Good," he said. "Patricia has organized the evidence from the safe deposit box. It's substantial, Penelope. With the flash drive, we'll have everything we need to go to the police." "And then what?" I asked. "What happens to the children if Victoria is arrested? As their grandmother, you would likely be granted temporary custody while the legal process unfolds. And given the provisions in Malcolm's actual will, you would control their financial interests regardless." The thought of having my grandchildren with me permanently brought a mix of emotions: joy at being reunited with them, sorrow at the circumstances, and anxiety about what they would face in the coming months. The weekend passed quickly. filled with small moments of happiness amid the underlying tension of our situation. We baked cookies, played board games, watched movies, all the things we used to do before Malcolm's death tore our family apart. By Sunday afternoon, I was almost reluctant to see them go, knowing what lay ahead. As they prepared to leave, I hugged them both tightly. "Remember, be careful," I whispered, "and call me as soon as you can." "We will," Oliver promised. "I will find the flash drive, Grandma." I watched them walk away, my heart heavy with both hope and fear. They were so young to be involved in something so serious, yet they had shown remarkable courage and perception throughout this ordeal. Hours passed without word from them. I paced my house, checking my phone obsessively. Daniel called twice to check on the progress, but I had no updates to share. Finally, at 8:30 p.m., my phone rang. It was Oliver. "Grandma," he said, his voice tight with excitement and fear. "We found it. The flash drive was exactly where you said, taped under the bottom drawer of Dad's tool chest." Relief washed over me. "That's wonderful, Oliver. Do you have it with you?" "Yes. We're at a friend's house right now. We told Mom we were studying together after getting back from Aunt Sarah's." "Good thinking. Can you bring it to me?" There was a pause. "That's the problem. Mom's picking us up in an hour. We won't be able to get away tonight." I thought quickly. "Is there any way you could mail it? Or hide it somewhere I could retrieve it?" "I have a better idea," he said. "My basketball game tomorrow. It's at school at 4 p.m. You could come, and I could give it to you then." "Perfect," I agreed. "I'll be there. Just keep it safe until then." "I will. Oh, and Grandma, we looked at what's on it. There are folders with dates and names. One is labeled Victoria and Lockwood. Another says financial records. And there's a video file called Watch This." My breath caught. "Did you watch it?" "No. We didn't have time. But it's all there. Whatever Dad was collecting." There was a pause. Then Oliver added in a lower voice, "I think Mom did something to Dad. I think she hurt him." "Oliver," I said gently, "we don't know that for sure yet. Let's not jump to conclusions. I know what I saw on that flash drive, Grandma. The folders, the files. Dad was investigating Mom, and then he died. That's not a coincidence." Before I could respond, I heard Abigail's voice in the background. "Someone's coming. We have to go. I'll see you tomorrow, Grandma," Oliver said quickly, and then the line went dead. I immediately called Daniel to update him. "They found the flash drive. Oliver's going to give it to me at his basketball game tomorrow afternoon." "That's excellent news," Daniel said. "I'll meet you there. Once we have the flash drive, we can take everything to the police." I hung up feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. We were so close to the truth, to justice for Malcolm. But something nagged at me, a fear that Victoria might somehow discover what we were doing, that she might take drastic measures to protect herself. I tried to push these thoughts aside as I prepared for bed. Tomorrow, we would have the final piece of evidence. Tomorrow, the truth would come out. But as I lay in bed that night, sleep eluded me. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were heading toward a dangerous confrontation, one that might put my grandchildren at risk. Victoria had already shown she was capable of deception, manipulation, and possibly murder. What would she do if she felt cornered? With these troubling thoughts swirling in my mind, I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, dreaming of Malcolm, of the flash drive, and of Victoria's face twisted in rage as her crimes were exposed. "Stay away from us," she shrieked, her composure completely shattered. "They're my children." The gymnasium fell silent as everyone watched the scene unfold. Oliver broke free from Victoria's grip while teachers approached, concerned by her behavior. "Mrs. Harrington, is everything all right?" asked Coach Wilson. Victoria composed herself slightly. "Family emergency. My children need to come with me now." Daniel had stepped away to call the police. I moved closer to my grandchildren, determined not to let Victoria take them. "Kids, your grandmother has been telling you lies," Victoria said desperately. "We need to leave town tonight." "Why?" Oliver challenged. "Because Grandma found Dad's flash drive? The one with all the evidence?" Victoria's face drained of color. "What flash drive? What are you talking about?" "The one Dad hid," Abigail said. "But with the video he made before he died." Victoria's eyes darted between her children, me, and the exits. I could see her calculating her options, realizing she was cornered. "This is ridiculous," she stammered. "You're all confused. Malcolm died of a heart attack. It was tragic but natural." "The police will determine that," Daniel said, rejoining us. "They're on their way." Victoria's expression hardened. "You'll regret this, Penelope. All of you will." She turned and rushed toward the exit. Coach Wilson stepped forward. "Mrs. Brooks, I think it's best if you wait for the authorities." But Victoria pushed past him and disappeared through the doors. "Should we go after her?" I asked Daniel. "The police will handle it," he assured me. "Our priority is the children." I turned to Oliver and Abigail, who stood shell-shocked by the scene that had just unfolded. "Are you both okay?" I asked, pulling them close. "Did Mom really kill Dad?" Abigail asked, her voice small. "We don't know for sure," I said gently. "But there's evidence that suggests she might have been involved. The police will investigate everything." "What happens to us now?" Oliver asked. "You'll stay with me," I promised. "No matter what happens, I'll take care of you both." As we waited for the police to arrive, I held my grandchildren close, finally reunited after months of separation and lies. The road ahead would be difficult, but at least now we faced it together. The next few days passed in a blur of police statements, legal meetings, and emotional conversations. Victoria had disappeared after fleeing the gymnasium, but her freedom was short-lived. Police apprehended her at Portland International Airport, attempting to board a flight to Mexico. James Lockwood was arrested at his office the same day. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Malcolm's video testimony, combined with the financial records and other documentation, painted a damning picture of fraud, embezzlement, and premeditated murder. Toxicology tests run on a sample of Malcolm's hair, preserved during the autopsy, confirmed prolonged exposure to propranolol, supporting the theory that Victoria had been poisoning him gradually. Through it all, Oliver and Abigail stayed with me. A judge granted me temporary custody, while the legal proceedings against Victoria moved forward. Patricia Winters successfully filed to have Malcolm's authentic will recognized, ensuring the children's inheritance was protected, and that I would remain trustee until they came of age. One evening, about a week after Victoria's arrest, we sat together in my living room. The children had been quiet all day, processing the reality of their mother's betrayal. "Grandma," Abigail said suddenly, "do you think Mom ever loved Dad? Or us?" The question broke my heart. "I believe she did, in her own way," I answered carefully. "People are complicated, Abigail. They can love and still make terrible choices. But she killed him," Oliver said flatly. "And how could she love him and do that?" I sighed, wishing I had better answers. "I don't know. Sometimes people become so focused on what they want that they lose sight of what's truly important." "What will happen to her?" Abigail asked. "She'll go to trial," I explained, "and likely to prison for a long time. I'm sorry. I wish things were different." "I don't," Oliver said firmly. "She deserves it. For what she did to Dad. For lying to us about you. For everything." I took his hand. "It's okay to be angry, Oliver. It's also okay to still love her. She's your mother." "I don't know what I feel anymore," he admitted, "except that I'm glad we're with you now." "Me too," Abigail agreed, leaning against my shoulder. In that moment, despite all the pain and loss, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. My son was gone, taken too soon by the woman he had trusted, but his children were safe. The truth had come to light, and somehow, we would move forward together. 6 months later, we sat in a courtroom, waiting for the verdict. Victoria's trial had been grueling, exposing all the painful details of her betrayal and crimes. The children had been spared testifying, but they had insisted on being present for the verdict. When it came, it was decisive, guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder. Victoria showed no emotion as the judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. James Lockwood, who had testified against her in exchange for a reduced sentence, received 20 years for his role in the embezzlement scheme and conspiracy to commit murder. As we left the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements. I shielded the children, hurrying them to the car where Elliot was waiting to drive us home. "It's finally over," he said, as we pulled away from the courthouse. "The legal part is," I agreed, glancing at my grandchildren in the back seat. "The healing is just beginning." That evening, we gathered at my house, now our house, with Elliot and Patricia for a quiet dinner. It wasn't a celebration, exactly, but a recognition that one chapter had closed and another was beginning. "I've been thinking," Elliot said as we finished dessert. "Malcolm always wanted the company to stay in the family. Oliver, when you're ready, no pressure, no timeline, there could be a place for you at Harrington and Brooks." Oliver looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I'd like that. Someday. And for now," Patricia added, "the company is stable again. The embezzled funds are being recovered, and Elliot has done an excellent job steering things back on course." "What about Dad's projects?" Abigail asked. "The buildings he designed. We're finishing them," Elliot assured her. "Exactly as he planned them. In fact, we've named our newest development the Malcolm in his honor." I felt tears well up, touched by this tribute to my son. After our guests left, the three of us sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset. Oliver had an arm around his sister, and I held her hand. We were different now, all of us changed by what we had endured, but we were together, and we were healing. "Do you think Dad would be proud of us?" Abigail asked softly. "Oh, sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "He would be so incredibly proud of both of you. Your strength, your courage, your hearts, just as I am." Oliver nodded, his eyes glistening. "I still talk to him sometimes. In my head. I like to think he can hear me. I believe he can," I said. "The people we love never truly leave us. They live on in our hearts, in our memories, and in the people we become because of them." We sat in comfortable silence as the sky darkened and stars appeared one by one. Malcolm was gone, taken from us by betrayal and greed, but his legacy lived on, in his children, in his work, and in the truth that had finally come to light. As for me, I had lost my son, but reclaimed my grandchildren. Life had dealt us a terrible blow, but we had weathered it together. And somehow, in the midst of our grief, we had found a way forward, a new path illuminated by love, truth, and the enduring bonds of family. "I love you both," I said, squeezing Abigail's hand and reaching for Oliver's. "So very much." "We love you too, Grandma," they replied in unison. And in that moment, despite everything we had lost, I knew that we would be okay. Different, changed, scarred, but okay. Together, 1 year after Victoria's conviction, we stood together at Malcolm's grave. It was a beautiful spring day, birds singing in the trees overhead, wildflowers dotting the cemetery grounds. Oliver, now 17, placed a small model building beside the headstone, a replica of the Malcolm, the apartment complex that had been completed in his father's honor. "Dad would have loved this," he said quietly. "It's exactly how he designed it. He would be so proud of you," I told him. "It's the way you've worked with Elliot, learning the business." Oliver had started interning at Harrington and Brooks after school, showing a natural aptitude for construction and design that reminded me so much of Malcolm. He was finding his path, healing through connection to his father's legacy. Abigail, 15 now, placed a bouquet of lilies, Malcolm's favorite, beside the model building. She had changed too over the past year, channeling her emotions into writing and drama. Her school counselor said it was healthy, a way of processing her trauma through creative expression. "I wrote something," she said, pulling a folded paper from her pocket. "Can I read it?" "Of course, sweetheart," I encouraged her. She unfolded the paper, took a deep breath, and began to read. "Dear Dad, it's been 467 days since you left us. Sometimes it feels like yesterday, other times like a lifetime ago. I'm sorry about Mom. Sorry you didn't get to see justice done. Sorry for all the time we lost believing her lies. But I'm also grateful. Grateful for the years we had with you. Grateful that Grandma never gave up fighting for us. Grateful that the truth came out, even though it hurt. I'm learning that it's possible to hold grief and gratitude together, that they're not opposites but companions on this journey. I'm learning that family isn't always what we expect, but it's where we find love that never gives up. We're okay, Dad. Different, but okay. Oliver's following in your footsteps. Grandma's taking care of us, and I'm finding my voice. We still miss you every day. We always will, but we're living in a way that would make you proud. I promise. Love always. Abigail." By the time she finished, tears were streaming down all our faces. I pulled my grandchildren close, these remarkable young people who had endured so much yet continued to grow and thrive. That was beautiful, I told Abigail. Absolutely beautiful. We stood there for a while longer, each lost in our own thoughts and memories. Then, by unspoken agreement, we turned to leave, walking arm in arm back to the car. That evening, we had a small gathering at our home. Elliot and his wife, Patricia, and a few of the children's friends. It wasn't a somber occasion, but a celebration of how far we'd come, of the family we had forged through adversity. As I watched Oliver laughing with Elliot, discussing some architectural detail of their latest project, and Abigail animatedly describing her upcoming role in the school play, I felt Malcolm's presence strongly, not in a supernatural way, but in the continuation of his legacy, in the lives of his children. Later, as the guests departed and the house grew quiet, I sat on the porch swing, looking up at the stars, the same stars Malcolm had gazed upon, the same stars that would shine on his children as they grew into adulthood. "We're doing okay, Malcolm," I whispered to the night sky. "I'm keeping my promise. Your children are safe, loved, and thriving. They'll never forget you." "Neither will I." A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and I closed my eyes, allowing myself to imagine, just for a moment, that it was Malcolm's response, his acknowledgement, his approval. Some wounds never fully heal, some losses leave permanent scars. But we were proving that even in the aftermath of betrayal and heartbreak, it was possible to rebuild, to find joy again, to create something beautiful from the broken pieces. And that, perhaps, was Malcolm's greatest legacy of all. 5 years later, I stood in the crowded auditorium of Portland State University, searching the sea of graduates in their caps and gowns. Finally, I spotted him, Oliver, tall and handsome in his regalia, the tassel of his cap swinging as he turned to wave at us. "There he is!" Abigail exclaimed beside me, now a poised young woman of 20, home from her sophomore year at NYU's drama program. She had blossomed into a talented actress, her natural empathy and emotional depth serving her well on stage. We watched with pride as Oliver crossed the stage to receive his degree in architectural engineering. At 22, he had already secured a position at Harrington and Brooks, where he had continued to work part-time throughout college. Elliot was grooming him to eventually take over leadership of the company, fulfilling Malcolm's dream of keeping the business in the family. After the ceremony, we found Oliver among the crowd of graduates and their families. "Congratulations, sweetheart," I said, embracing him tightly. "Oh, your father would be so proud." "Thanks, Grandma," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I was thinking about him the whole time." "He was there," Abigail assured him. "In spirit." We took photos, celebrated with lunch at Malcolm's favorite restaurant, and then returned home for a small gathering with close friends. As evening fell, Oliver pulled me aside, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Grandma, there's something I want to show you," he said, leading me to the study that had once been Malcolm's home office, and now served as a workspace for both children when they were home. On the desk lay architectural plans, beautifully rendered and detailed. "What's this?" I asked, studying the drawings. "My first solo project," Oliver explained. "A community center for children who've lost parents to violent crime. A place for counseling, support groups, recreational therapy, all the things that helped Abigail and me after everything." I traced the elegant lines of the building, noting the thoughtful details. Abundant natural light, peaceful garden spaces, welcoming common areas designed to foster connection and healing. "Oliver, this is magnificent," I said, genuinely impressed by both the design and the purpose behind it. "It's called the Phoenix Center," he continued, "for rising from the ashes, and I want to build it on that empty lot near the river, the one Dad bought right before he died. Elliot says the company will back it as our first charitable project." "He would love this," I said, tears welling in my eyes, "using his land to help other children heal from similar traumas." "That's not all," Oliver said, flipping to another page. "And see this wing here. It's a dedicated space for grandparents raising grandchildren after crisis or loss. We'll offer legal resources, support groups, financial counseling, all the things you had to figure out on your own. It's called the Penelope Wing." I stared at him, overwhelmed by emotion. "You're naming part of it after me. You saved us, Grandma," he said simply. "When our world fell apart, you fought for us, protected us, loved us back to wholeness. This center will help other families do the same. I embraced him, too moved for words. This remarkable young man, who had endured such betrayal and loss, was channeling his pain into purpose, creating something beautiful that would help others heal. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Abigail had retired to her room, I sat in the garden Malcolm had designed, reflecting on the journey of the past 6 years. The pain of losing him would never completely fade. The betrayal by Victoria would always remain a scar on our family's history. But look what had emerged from that darkness. Oliver, with his vision for healing and building. Abigail, with her gift for storytelling and empathy. And me, granted the precious gift of raising my grandchildren and witnessing their growth into extraordinary adults. I thought of Victoria, still in prison, who would remain there for the rest of her life. According to the few updates we received, she had never expressed remorse, maintaining her innocence despite the overwhelming evidence. The children had chosen not to visit her, a decision I respected. Some wounds were too deep, some betrayals too profound for conventional forgiveness. Yet in our own way, we had moved forward, not by forgetting or diminishing what happened, but by refusing to let it define us or determine our future. We had honored Malcolm's memory, not just through grief, but through living purposefully, through carrying forward his values of integrity, creativity, and love of family. As stars appeared in the twilight sky, I closed my eyes and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for Malcolm's life, for the privilege of raising his children, for the beauty that had somehow emerged from our deepest pain. The road had not been easy. There had been nightmares and therapy sessions, tears and setbacks, but we had traveled it together, supporting each other, finding strength we didn't know we possessed. And now, watching Oliver and Abigail step confidently into their futures, I knew that our story, though marked by loss and betrayal, was ultimately one of resilience, of justice, and of love that transcended even death. Some might call it a tragedy, but I preferred to see it as Malcolm would have, as a testament to the enduring power of truth, to the healing that comes when justice is served, and to the unbreakable bonds of family that sustain us through our darkest hours. As I returned to the house, where my grandchildren, Malcolm's children, were safe and thriving, I felt a profound sense of peace. We had lost much, but we had gained something precious too, the knowledge that even in our greatest pain, we could find purpose. Even after devastating betrayal, we could rebuild trust. Even when darkness seemed to engulf us, light would eventually return. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable legacy of all. Before we began this incredible story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're listening to this story from.